AITA for not letting my MIL see my newborn after she insulted me? Hi, everyone. 28F, honestly didn't think I'd ever be posting here, but things have escalated so badly that I don't know if I'm overreacting or finally standing up for myself. This is going to be long, so I'm sorry in advance, but I feel like context matters. I've been married to my husband, 31M, for 3 years now. We were together for about 4 years before that. He's genuinely a good man, kind, patient, and usually very supportive. The problem has always been his mother. From the very beginning, my MIL made it clear that she didn't think I was right for her son. She never said it outright in the early days, but it came through in little comments. You know the type, smiles on the surface, but everything has a sting underneath. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you're much shorter than I expected." Not even a hello first. I laughed it off at the time, because I didn't want to seem sensitive, but that set the tone for everything that followed. At family dinners, she would constantly compare me to my husband's ex. Apparently, the ex was more traditional, a better cook, and very family-oriented. Once, right in front of me, she told a relative, "We really thought he'd marry someone like her." I tried to brush it off. I really did. I told myself she just needed time. But time didn't fix anything. It just made her more comfortable being openly critical. When we got engaged, instead of congratulating me, she hugged my husband and said, "Are you sure you're ready for this responsibility?" Then she pulled me aside later and told me, "Marriage isn't easy. Some girls think it's all fun and pictures." I remember going home that night and crying in the bathroom so my fiancé wouldn't see. I didn't want to start problems between him and his mom, and that's kind of been the pattern. I absorb things. I keep the peace. I don't want to be that wife who causes a rift. Our wedding was complicated. She insisted on being involved in everything, but nothing I chose was ever good enough. The venue was too small, the decor was too modern, and my dress was apparently not very bridal. I still remember her saying that while looking at me in the mirror during a fitting. But the worst part? She invited people we didn't even know. When I tried to push back, she told my husband, "In our family, weddings are about community, not just the couple." He did stand up for me sometimes, but not always. He hates conflict, especially with her. So a lot of the time, he'd say things like, "That's just how she is," or "She doesn't mean it like that." After we got married, things calmed down a little, not because she changed, but because we saw her less often. Then I got pregnant. At first, I thought this might be a turning point. I genuinely hoped that becoming a grandmother would soften her toward me. I was wrong. When we told her the news, she didn't hug me. She hugged my husband and said, "Finally." Then she turned to me and asked, "You've been taking proper care of yourself, right?" From that point on, she inserted herself into every aspect of my pregnancy. She had opinions about everything: what I should eat, how much I should exercise, what doctor I should see, even how I should sleep. If I mentioned feeling tired, she'd say things like, "Pregnancy isn't an illness." If I said I didn't feel like eating something, she'd respond, "That's not good for the baby." At one point, she actually told me, "In my time, women didn't complain this much." I work full-time, by the way. I was dealing with nausea, exhaustion, and hormonal swings, and still trying to function like a normal human being. But according to her, I was just being dramatic. Things really started to escalate in my second trimester. She began coming over unannounced. At first, it was small things, dropping off food or baby clothes. I tried to be grateful. But then she started staying longer and longer and longer. She would rearrange things in my kitchen while talking about how inefficient my setup was. Once, I came back from the bedroom and found her going through our cabinets, saying, "You shouldn't be eating half of this while pregnant." I was so shocked, I didn't even know what to say. When I brought it up to my husband, he said, "She's just worried. It's her first grandchild." I asked him to talk to her about boundaries, especially about showing up without calling. He said he would, but nothing changed. If anything, she got worse. She started referring to the baby as my baby. Not your baby, not the baby, my baby. At first, I thought I was overthinking it, but then she said things like, "When my baby is born, I'll come stay for a few weeks to help." not ask.
Tell.
I told her politely that we wanted some time alone after the birth to adjust as a family. She smiled and said, "You'll change your mind. New mothers always do." That sentence stuck with me. It wasn't just dismissive, it was like she didn't see me as someone capable of making decisions about my own child. Around the 7th month, we had a bigger issue. We had decided not to share the baby's name until after birth. It was something special for us, and honestly, I didn't want her criticizing it like everything else. She kept pushing. "What names are you considering? Just give me a list." I should have a say. I'm the grandmother. We kept saying no. Then one day, I found out she had been asking extended family for suggestions and telling them that we hadn't decided yet because I was being indecisive. That hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just interference. It was rewriting the narrative to make me look incompetent. I confronted her about it, very calmly, I swear, and she said, "I'm just trying to help. You're taking everything so personally." That's another pattern. She says something hurtful, then turns it into my problem for reacting. My husband told her to stop involving others, and she did for about a week. Then came the baby shower. I didn't even want a big one, but she insisted on organizing it. I agreed because I thought it might make her feel included and maybe reduce tension. Big mistake. She took over everything. The guest list? Mostly her friends. The theme? Not what I wanted. The food? Things I couldn't even eat comfortably. But I stayed quiet. I kept telling myself, just get through it. On the day of the shower, she made a speech. I wish I was exaggerating when I say this, but she barely mentioned me. She talked about how excited she was to become a grandmother, how her son was going to be an amazing father, and how this baby was a blessing for the family. Then she said, laughing, "Let's just hope the baby takes after our side." Everyone laughed. I smiled. I really did. But something inside me cracked a little. Because it wasn't just a joke. It was a pattern, a constant reminder that I was secondary. After the shower, I told my husband I didn't want her in the delivery room. He said that was completely fair and supported me. But when he told her, she lost it. She called me selfish, said I was keeping her grandchild away from her, and even told my husband, "She's already trying to control everything." That was the first time I seriously considered limiting contact after the baby was born. But I didn't act on it yet. I kept thinking maybe things would calm down. Maybe once the baby was here, she'd focus on being loving instead of critical. I was still holding on to that hope. The last month of my pregnancy had already been exhausting, physically and emotionally, but the final week was especially hard. I was barely sleeping, constantly uncomfortable, and honestly just anxious about everything. Despite all of that, I was also excited. I kept telling myself that once my baby was here, things would feel worth it. When I went into labor, my husband rushed me to the hospital, and for those first few hours, it was just us. Calm, focused, and honestly kind of beautiful in a chaotic way. For the first time in months, I felt like everything else, his mom, the stress, the constant criticism, just faded into the background. He stayed with me the entire time. He held my hand, encouraged me, reassured me. In those moments, I felt like we were a team again. We had already agreed. No one else in the delivery room, and we wouldn't have visitors until we were ready. He had told his mother that clearly. That boundary lasted to about half a day. After I delivered, I was completely drained. I could barely sit up without pain. I was shaky, emotional, overwhelmed, everything at once. But then they placed my baby in my arms. And I swear, none of the pain mattered for a moment. I just held her and cried. My husband was crying too. It was quiet, emotional, and perfect in a way I can't fully describe. That moment didn't last very long. A few hours later, there was a knock, and before we could even respond, the door opened. And there she was, Maya Mael. I remember feeling this immediate drop in my stomach. Not even anger at first, just dread. My husband stood up immediately and said, "Mom, what are you doing here?" We said no visitors yet. And she just waved him off like it was nothing. "I'm not visitors, I'm family." Then she walked straight past him and came toward me. I was sitting there, barely able to move, holding my newborn, still trying to process everything that had just happened, and she didn't even look at me properly. Her entire focus was on the baby. She leaned in and said, "Let me see my baby." Not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not even, "Can I hold her?" Just that. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't say anything yet. I didn't want to cause a scene. I was exhausted. My husband stepped in and said, "Mom, you should have waited. We'll call you when we're ready." She ignored him again. She reached out like she was going to take the baby from my arms. And that's when I finally spoke. I said, as calmly as I could, "Please don't. I'm not ready yet." She paused for a second, then smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that feels like it's covering irritation. "You need to relax," she said. "You're going to have to learn to let people help you." I said, "I understand, but I just gave birth. I want a little time." She let out this small laugh like I was being unreasonable. In my time, mothers didn't behave like this. That line again. I felt my eyes start to burn, but I held it together. My husband tried again to get her to leave, but she just kept talking over both of us. Then she turned to him and said, "Go get something to eat. You look exhausted. I'll stay with the baby." That's when something in me snapped a little. Not fully, but enough. I said more firmly this time, "No, she's staying with me." There was a pause. A long one. And then she looked directly at me, really looked at me for the first time since she walked in. And that's when it happened. She said, in a low voice but loud enough for both of us to hear, "If you're this overwhelmed already, I'm honestly worried about what kind of mother you're going to be." I felt like the air got knocked out of me. I don't even remember breathing for a second. My husband immediately said, "Mom, that's not okay." But she kept going. "I'm serious," she said. "A baby needs stability, not someone who gets emotional over every little thing." I was shaking at that point, not crying, just shaking. Because it wasn't just what she said. It was the timing. I had just gone through one of the most painful, vulnerable experiences of my life. I was sitting there, exhausted, holding my newborn for the first time, and she chose that moment to question whether I was capable of being her mother. I said, "Please leave." My voice was quiet, but it was firm. She didn't move. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to make sure this baby is raised properly. If that means I have to step in more than usual, then so be it." That was it. That was the moment everything shifted. Because it wasn't just an insult anymore. It was a declaration. She wasn't just criticizing me. She was positioning herself as someone who had the right to step in over me. Like I was optional. Like I was just someone who happened to give birth, not the actual mother. My husband stepped forward and said, much more firmly this time, "Mom, you need to leave. Now." She looked at him like she couldn't believe he was siding with me. "You're really going to let her talk to me like this?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes. Because you're out of line." I don't think I've ever seen her speechless before. For a second, she just stared at him. Then she shook her head, grabbed her bag, and before leaving, she said, "You'll regret shutting me out when you realize you can't handle this on your own." And then she walked out. The room went completely silent. I didn't realize I was crying until my husband came over and held me. He kept apologizing, over and over. He said he didn't think she would go that far, that he should have been stricter earlier, that he was sorry for not protecting me better. And honestly, I believe him. But the damage was done. That moment replayed in my head again and again. Her voice was there. "I'm worried about what kind of mother you're going to be." It got into my head in a way I wasn't prepared for. And that's when I made my decision. I told my husband, "She's not seeing the baby. Not for now. Not until I feel safe. Not until she acknowledges what she said." He didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "Okay." But, of course, it didn't end there. Because the next day, the calls started. First it was his aunt. Then his older cousin. Then people I had met maybe once or twice at family gatherings. His aunt told him, "Your mother is devastated. She said your wife humiliated her and refused to let her see her own grandchild." That was it. That was the version of events she shared. No mention of what she said to me. No mention of the hospital, the timing, the boundary crossing. Just that I refused her. I remember sitting there, holding my baby, listening to my husband repeat what his aunt said, and feeling this mix of anger and disbelief. Because somehow, even after everything, she had still managed to make herself the victim. My husband corrected her. He told his aunt that his mother had shown up uninvited and said something completely inappropriate to me right after I gave birth. There was a pause. And then his aunt said, "She probably didn't mean it like that. You know how she is." That sentence again. I hate that sentence now, because it's always used to excuse behavior that shouldn't be excused. Over the next few days, the pressure just kept building. A cousin messaged me saying, "Family is important. You'll regret this later." Someone else even said, "You're a mother now. You need to learn forgiveness." That one almost made me laugh, because apparently being a mother meant tolerating disrespect now. Meanwhile, I was barely sleeping, recovering physically, trying to learn how to take care of a newborn, and on top of that, constantly being made to feel like I was doing something wrong for protecting myself and my child. I started second-guessing everything. I asked my husband more than once, "Am I overreacting?" And every single time he said no. But I could tell he was feeling the pressure too. He loves his family. He's never been the type to go against them like this. And now suddenly, he was being put in a position where he had to choose, clearly and publicly. A few days later, his mom finally called him directly. I was sitting right next to him when it happened. He put it on speaker. She was crying, like full-on crying, saying things like, "I can't believe you're doing this to me," and "I just wanted to see my grandchild." Not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she acknowledge what she said. So my husband asked her directly. He said, "Do you remember what you said to her in the hospital?" There was a pause. Then she said, "I was emotional. I didn't mean anything by it." He said, "You told her you were worried about what kind of mother she would be." Another pause. "And then this part still makes my blood boil," she said. Well, was I wrong? I felt like my chest physically tightened. My husband went completely silent for a second. Then he said, very calmly, but very firmly, "Yes, you were." She didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. She said, "I've raised children. I know what it takes. She's too sensitive. If she can't handle a simple comment, how's she going to handle a baby?" That was it. That was the moment something in both of us just shut off. Because up until then, I think there was still a small part of me that hoped she might apologize. That she might reflect even a little. But she didn't. She wasn't sorry. She didn't think she did anything wrong. In her mind, I was still the problem. After the call ended, my husband just sat there for a while. That night, we made a decision together. Not out of anger. Not impulsively. But very clearly. We were going no contact. No calls. No visits. No updates. No pictures. Nothing. At first, it felt extreme. I won't lie. I kept thinking, is this too much? But then I'd replay everything in my head. The comments during my pregnancy. The constant undermining. The hospital incident. And then the complete refusal to take accountability. And I realized this wasn't about one moment. It was a pattern. And more importantly, it was about what I was willing to allow around my child. Because if she could say those things to me, at my most vulnerable, what would she say later? To me, in front of my child, about me, to my child? I couldn't take that risk. The family didn't take our decision well. Some of them tried to mediate. Some of them tried to guilt us. Some of them just stopped talking to us altogether. And honestly, that part hurt. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. There were nights I cried because I felt like I had somehow broken the family. But then I'd look at my baby, peacefully sleeping, safe. And I'd remind myself why we made this decision. Over time, things got quieter. The calls slowed down. The messages stopped. People moved on. Or, at least, stopped trying to change our minds. For the first time, I feel like I can just exist without being judged or criticized or undermined. I'm learning how to be a mom at my own pace. I'm making mistakes, of course. Everyone does. But I'm not hearing her voice in my head as much anymore. It's fading. My husband has been incredible through all of this. He checks in on me constantly. He reassures me. He's present in a way I think even he didn't realize he could be. And I can tell this wasn't easy for him. But he chose us. He chose me and our child. And that means everything. As for his mom, she's still not part of our lives. We haven't reached out. She hasn't apologized. And unless that changes, genuinely changes, I don't see anything changing on our end. Maybe that makes me harsh. Maybe some people will say I should be the bigger person. But I don't think protecting your peace, especially as a new mother, is something you should have to apologize for. So, AITA for not letting my MIL see my newborn after she insulted me? Because right now I don't feel like I am. I feel like I finally did something right,